Hello again, Canada and soccer fans from coast to coast to coast. Happy Monday. I hope you all enjoyed your weekends. Today on the Hangout, we are fulfilling a promise that we have been making for weeks. Joining Oliver Platt, Kurt Larson, and yours truly, Adam Jenkins, is the head coach of the Halifax Wanderers, Mr. Stephen Hart. Coach Hart, welcome to the show, and thank you for your flexibility, but we finally landed you.
Anything for you guys, no problem.
Stephen, it would be a massive understatement to say that the past 7 to 10 days have been nothing short of hell for many people in Nova Scotia. Compounding the quarantine, there was the tragic and abhorrent shootings of April 18th and 19th. First of all, from everyone at OneSoccer, our most sincere condolences and thoughts go to everyone affected. No words can ease the pain, but we are with you in spirit, even if we can't be there in person. We do know the club had a watch party this past weekend, and you've been engaging with your supporters, but I want to ask, how are things going out east, all things considering?
Well, I guess everybody, of course, you expressed it very well, and never forget. But we have to heal and just where we can support those that have suffered so much pain.
Mm. And speaking of togetherness, and obviously the entire province, the entire country in many ways coming together to just show as much support as possible. But with your team itself, the staff, everyone involved with the Wanderers, what are some of the things you've been doing, not just the past 7 to 10 days, but throughout this unprecedented pandemic, just to keep everyone together, focused, and engaged?
Well, the team behind the team, so to speak, have done well, of course, on social media. We have our own program with the players and the coaching staff that it's a daily sort of routines based on various topics, and the players have their training programs, their individuals. Then they have a sort of group collective strength training program, for lack of a better word, that's on Zoom. And we have some tactical discussions, and we have some fun moments, and we have try to be as interactive as possible and support each other.
Stephen, have you considered, it's been so long ago now that CPL teams kind of entered preseason, and I've forgotten how far you guys were actually into it, maybe a week to 10 days into preseason. Have you guys given any thought of just what it's going to take to get your team back up to speed in order to start a season? Like, what does that process even look like?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to say, really, because we have no experience with this. Usually, the players are in some form of training. They are working with the ball and all of that, and then they come into you, and then you start to put the more collective parts of the game together. But this is going to be very, very different, and hopefully, we can maintain certain levels of fitness, and it would be a matter of trying to get the roles and responsibilities of the teamwork in place, and then somehow try to find the games, from a competitive nature that the players would so desperately need before you actually enter the season itself.
Stephen, you did get through a lot of work in terms of rebuilding your roster before everything went on lockdown, obviously. How much different was it to build your squad this time around as opposed to last year when you were completely starting from scratch?
Well, I think last year, not only starting from scratch, but there were a lot of sort of stipulations into how, where the players could come from and how you could develop your team and who had first priority on players and all that sort of thing. But this year, we had a year under our belt. We wanted to make some changes. Some changes were forced upon us. Others we felt we needed to have a different type of player in those roles. It was quite a lot of fun actually doing it this year, and we think we found in many instances we found players that would give us a different look, whether it be a starting player or coming off the bench or fighting for a position or whatever. The competitiveness of the squad in the 12 days we were together was quite impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Coach, I've asked this question. Sorry, Kurt. I've asked this question to a couple different coaches and players on these hangouts, but I'm curious too, just mentioning the fact that there has been a lot of work and you're dealing with quite a few new pieces. How long do you think you need as a team to feel comfortable going into a season, whatever that may look like? I know that conversation's ongoing and there's a lot of different factors, but just with all of your experience, what is the minimum amount of a preseason or training camp you would need to feel comfortable get back going again?
Well, it's let me put it to you this way. You know, when your players, for example, when you have a national team and your players are playing and they're constantly playing, you find that you can have about 10 days together, 14 days together, and you get a certain rhythm, and you get players that are starting to understand each other. And the players that are not playing that much, they take a little longer to fall in. So now that everybody is in this sort of situation, because it's not like we're the only club in this situation, everybody's in this sort of situation.
Right.
I think that the big thing would be to be very, very careful of getting in, when this is all over and we get into the training, the enthusiasm, the players wanting to show certain things about themselves, and then the potential for injury. But to answer your question more specifically, I think you're gonna need about, I say about 3 weeks really to get your squad going, and that's if you can get the games. Now it's very difficult for us to get games here that help raise the standard. I think the most important thing really will be playing a lot of games, training games where you can work on things, and that's always going to be our disadvantage here.
I have two questions, Stephen. The first one was, were you able to get everybody into Nova Scotia, into Halifax, all the players that you'd signed before the season? Have you been able to? How complicated was that? What made that so complicated? Was it just timing of when everything kind of got locked down? Is it complicate things even more?
Yeah, well, there were a couple of things. We had some players in university, of course. They managed to get in. A few players got in just as we locked down, and then the flight, the borders were closed, and 2 internationals got their visas and couldn't get, and 1 coaching staff couldn't get in.
Okay, let's just look at the roster then as a whole. What did you learn maybe from player in terms of player recruitment from season 1 to season 2? Talked to a lot of people at the league, a lot of I would say recruitment specialists at the league who have said that you guys have done quite well to get the players in you have. So what did you learn from season 1 and building that inaugural roster to season 2?
Well, in season 1, you kind of know the type of players you want, but it was very difficult to get those players, to convince those players to leave where they were, to come to this new league. And I think the exposure this league got, a lot of players were more than willing to give it a try. So that being said, the players and the type of player that you want, it sort of made it a little bit easier to try and go after that player and convince that player to come here. And of course, as I said, you had less stipulation on where the players could come from, and some players wanted to leave us and go elsewhere, and some players wanted to leave their clubs and go elsewhere. So it was one of those situations where you make a list of 2 or 3 players for each position, and you go after them. And once it was within your financial capability, you try to get the player.
Just lastly from me, Stephen, the squad does look a lot younger as well. Obviously, some players like Pereira, Elton John, Karuma, some of the veteran guys have left, and then there's a lot of players in the squad now in that kind of 22 to 26 age range. Was that a priority for you, and why did you go down that route?
Well, I think we always wanted a younger squad. You can be a younger squad with players that have some experience, and you can be an older squad with players that really don't have that amount of experience. And we wanted a younger squad, especially in view of the long term, what we would like to build upon and what we would like the club to stand for. So we sort of took the initiative and made those decisions.
Hard to believe it's been almost 8 weeks or more since before this pandemic started, and you were in Halifax visiting Stephen and doing a lot of different pieces of content for OneSoccer. So if you can, jog your memory a little bit and take us back to your time in Halifax and what that experience was like hanging out with Stephen and the crew.
So the idea behind the series was for us to send our documentary crew really to each CPL market, and not necessarily do a CPL focused kind of long form documentary kind of show, but to do a piece on something that we find to be important in that community. So I covered Stephen for a long time. I have a bit of a relationship with him, so decided it was best for me to go out and kind of conduct the interviews out there. And these are, 30 for 30 style, long form Canadian soccer pieces, the kind of stuff that we haven't really seen traditional media, legacy media, really put much time into, right? So, yeah, we went out there but right before preseason started, and Stephen gave us so much of his time that we were thankful for. And I think it's just important to tell what we would call real Canadian soccer stories, and some of the most important and entertaining and really special soccer stories out there. And as we know, Stephen arrived in Halifax from Trinidad, went to school there, was on a really competitive kind of senior men's team, and then transitioned to the coaching side. So really, it's about Stephen's journey from landing in Halifax and really creating this Canadian soccer life, and all the stories along the way, from coaching the national team at every single level to the players he's come across. And seeing where it took us. I think we had, Stephen, a 2-hour chat. I think I wore you out, but you tell me, was it enjoyable?
Yeah, I think it was, in the sense that it was not. You are right. It's not something that was done before, and yeah, you made it easy for me, even though some of the questions were pretty hard.
That's Kurt's specialty, Stephen. Don't worry. If you missed any of these OneSoccer stories, you can check them out on the YouTube channel. We have a playlist for all of the OneSoccer stories. Highly recommend that you go and catch up on those, or watch them again if you really enjoyed them. Kurt, what was it like, more specifically, just being around the rock star status of Stephen Hart in Halifax? Was it like walking to a restaurant, free donaires, free drinks? I mean, you had a local legend with you. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because you walk into a donaire place, which we did on the last day there, and of course the man, the top chef there knows Stephen, and I think he even tried to give us the meal for free. Of course, Stephen wasn't having that, but yeah, it's interesting. It is like you're with a local celebrity. But the thing about Stephen Hart that I take with me is that it always seems like no matter how many times you're around Stephen, he always comes up with a new story, a new entertaining story to tell you. And it's almost like he's forgotten more things about the game than most people, even live in a lifetime, right? We've heard that before. But that truly is the case. I mean, having coached the national team, having coached in Trinidad, the stories are endless. And most of them he can tell publicly, but some of them he can't.
Yeah, the Hangout is very conversational and relaxed, but it's not quite that relaxed. So we'll have to get those from Stephen himself. Ollie, you were supposed to go to Halifax too, if I'm correct. So what was your plan? What were you going to be doing out there? And how disappointed are you that you didn't get to go this time?
Very disappointed. Hopefully it's just a postponement rather than a cancellation, but I still haven't been out there, so I'd obviously love to get out there. But yeah, as Kurt mentioned, we had our videographers on the roads through much of the winter, shooting these documentaries, and you've seen some of them in the OneSoccer stories. If you've seen the CPL's Forever First videos, they're also shot by our video team. And then we were going out to Halifax to do their media day, which for people who don't know is essentially us gathering all the pre-season content that we need before the start of the season. So all the graphics that you see on our broadcasts, some pre-season interviews and all that kind of thing. So I was looking forward to that, but hopefully in time we'll get there.
Ollie, does that mean you're more than a talking head with a nice accent?
Well, that's for other people to judge, Adam.
Stephen, I guess another question for Stephen. I mean, anybody who visits Halifax from the outside has nothing but good things to say about it. And I know it's very early on in terms of recruiting for CPL teams, and who knows if you'll still be there, 5 or 10 years from now involved with that club. But do you see a day where whoever is managing that team, be it you, be it somebody else, can actually use that community and how cool of a city that is and how tight-knit a community that is to actually recruit players there? Is that happening right now?
I think it's happening right now. The players that played in the league got a very good sense of what it's like, and I think it's happening right now. I think from the quality of the stadium, be it a small stadium, but one that suits the CPL, the pitch, and then of course the fan base. I mean, really and truly, you come into a city that we have sports. They're all professional sport, but they're indoor. Where the outdoor professional sort of version of everything else, and then it's something to do in the summertime, and it's just a tremendous atmosphere. I mean, for those of you who've experienced it, and I mean, I've been in some great atmospheres, some very big stadiums, but I remember the opening game against Forge, and my assistant Derek King, who played in the Maracana against Ronaldinho. He was getting goosebumps because he said, I never thought I'd be hearing this and experiencing this really, and I didn't really take it all in until he said that. Really, I kind of zone out those things. But yeah, I think to answer your question, it's definitely something that it's going to grow, and we want it to be long term. We really want it to be long term, and I think with the fan group that we have and their passion and their loyalty, it's going to be a long term thing.
I'm always looking out for you, so I want to give you a little bit of a mental exercise right now. We know you've said time and time again that you've lost the soccer fan in you because you've been covering the game for so long. So that fan aspect has dimmed down a little bit. But hypothetically, let's jog that brain. Hypothetically, if you were a devout, big-time soccer fan in North America and the different health agencies and governments said, okay, Kurt Larson, it is good to go. We are opening the stadiums. Would you be attending the first game? Would you feel comfortable and ready to go back into that environment?
Yeah, I think it depends. A big thing for me right now, and it's probably due to my age, the condition I'm in, my where I am in my life, is trying to return to normal, right? And being able to just go about my life as I was this time last year when the CPL was just starting. So I think for me to feel comfortable going to a game, I would have to be able to experience something like that inside the stadium, whether it be not having to stand a certain distance from somebody, which, while it's the thing we need to do right now, it's not something that I hope we have to do down the road. I would not want to go to a stadium if people were taking my temperature. We see that in other countries. I wouldn't want to go to a stadium if people were forced to sit 6 seats away from me. So I think it would depend on what, that means. What does it mean to go to a game? Can I go to a game and have the same experience I did a year ago? I think that's what would matter to me the most.
Yeah. And I mean, we obviously don't have all the answers, but part of the reason we like to have these conversations, not only to check up on our friends and our coworkers, but just to sort of have these bigger conversations, because for a lot of people, you're stuck inside with the same group of people. So we want to be able to have those bigger topic conversations. So I'm going to ask you, and Ollie, feel free to start us off here. Do you think society is going to be sort of fundamentally changed after this, or at least there's going to be a lasting footprint from COVID in terms of the way people treat each other, and like sort of philosophically more, maybe they value their freedom a little bit more, maybe they're a little more hesitant around big crowds? What do you think is going to be the reaction to all this, Ollie?
Yeah, I don't know, but it is an interesting topic, right? Like you wonder if people are going to go back to normal in terms of shaking hands, and you look at European countries and they greet each other with a kiss sometimes. Is that a thing of the past now? Now we're all going to be more wary of transferring this kind of thing. Like Kurt said, like if the relevant authorities get to a point where they tell us it's safe to go back to stadiums and to gatherings of that kind, me personally, I would have no problem going back into that kind of environment. But you wonder if other people are maybe more wary. So who knows? Like it is really going to be kind of unprecedented, I think, in our lifetimes to see how people react to this.
And Coach, you just spoke about the community aspect of Halifax, and one of the things that makes Halifax so great is that community, everyone getting together. And it's certainly not unique to your city, but it's a big part of what makes Halifax tick. So with a team that's so ingrained with its fans and so close, and they love that interaction, same question for you. Do you think we're going to see significant changes, or at least for the short-term future?
I don't know if I could really answer that. I mean, the brotherly love that goes with fans coming to a stadium and all of that, it would be disheartening to think that our life would change forever because of this. There's certainly lessons to be learned because of this, but I hope not. I really don't have enough information on it to say one way or the other that our life is going to change forever. But as someone that appreciates people and what they bring to the game, I really hope we can get through this, get over it, learn lessons from it, but be able to carry on life the way that we know it, maybe a little less recklessly, but the way we more or less know it.
Yeah, it's part of what makes all of these different CPL clubs and just normal society that we're used to so great. And I think you sort of reflect in these moments. Maybe we took advantage of it a little bit. Kurt, do you have anything to add on this before we move on?
I always have something to add, Adam.
That's why I gave you the opportunity, my friend.
No. Yeah, what do I think this is going to look like? Hopefully we're out and about soon. We've seen today Ontario Premier Doug Ford released what that could look like, returning to some sense of normalcy and the stages by which that'll happen. But I think without a doubt, we're going to be hesitant to do the things that we weren't so hesitant to do before. We're going to be hesitant to sit close to people on transit. We're going to be hesitant to push the button to cross the street. I think in time we'll get through that. But I think the hesitation people are going to face is real.
I think one of the reasons why there is that bit of trepidation is it just seems, and I mean, I don't pretend to speak for everyone, but a lot of people, when I've had this conversation off air with them, seems like sometimes when you're on your phone, on social media, or even watching the news, it just seems like you can't escape from the constant coverage. And I mean, you got to strike the balance between staying informed and understanding what's allowed and what you should be doing to keep yourself safe, but also not getting so overwhelmed by the amount of information that's out there right now. So, Ollie, how have you been trying to strike that balance between information and sanity?
Well, I actually have a little bit of a thing where I think social media is an extremely bad place to get your news. And so about a year or 18 months or so ago, I basically just unfollowed every single social media account I followed aside from sports. So my Twitter feed is purely sports. And then I try and get my news from, a couple of newspaper subscriptions and magazines and that kind of thing. And hopefully sources with a little more credibility and reliability. But yeah, it is even just reading, before I go to bed most nights, I kind of have a scroll through the news, and even just reading some of the newspapers, it's pretty, it's easy to be disheartened by a lot of the things that you see and read. There's not a whole lot of good news going on. And even when there is good news, there seems to be a but attached to it. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but that's kind of my approach. I've shut down.
Well, I was surprised to see Jeff Paulus get back on Twitter so quick. He's been off and he's been off and on. He's been off and on 3 or 4 times in the last year.
Yeah, I complimented Jeff for getting off of social media, so I don't know why he's back.
And Stephen changed his name. Stephen changed his Twitter name.
Did I?
Well, a while ago, didn't you?
No.
Oh, okay, maybe not.
I don't even know how to do that.
Coach, same question for you. And not just necessarily social media, because I mean, it's a big way that a lot of people are consuming news right now, but whether it's radio, TV, print, however you do like to consume your news, how are you finding that balance between being informed and just taking that break sometimes when you need it?
Well, I'm not big on social media except for sport. Um, on the news front, my daughter is doing some translation of journalism work for various companies. I get my information more from her, that she says something is creditable and you should really read this. Um, and really and truly, once I got some information about the disease from virologists and all of that, and people who actually know what they're talking about, um, I just really look, sort of tune into local news to just see, look, what's happening and what I should be aware of. And other than that, it's news is too depressing, even at the best of times.
Right.
You can imagine now. I just stay away from that nonsense.
Yeah. Kurt, we know you're big on your social media. How have you found this balance? Because I know we talk every day in our pre-production meetings, and we use the time we have together to just catch up and check in on each other. But we know that it's hard to escape sometimes, especially when it's just you and a young family in a condo in Toronto. So how have you been able to strike that balance?
Sorry, I just got back from being iced out there. My internet froze. What was that to me?
We froze up on you. Did you? I was just asking same question for you. How have you been able to strike the balance? I mean, it's tough when you're isolated with a young family, and social media is obviously something that you engage with a lot. I mean, your 11,000 Twitter followers love to hear from you. So how have you been able to manage the flow of information and keeping your sanity?
Well, I made a rule for myself where I stopped tweeting after dinner time now. I was a little more inexperienced a few years ago and would just send out messages constantly at all hours of the day and night. So I realized that it's not good to go to bed wondering what your next tweet's going to be. So I stopped doing that. No, this has been this has been terrible, obviously, and
have you lost Kurt too?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've lost him.
Yeah, he's gone
all I heard was a Kurt Larson, this is terrible for a second. So Kurt, are you with us?
I'm here.
We're missing you, buddy. There's something going on with that internet of yours today. But yeah, I think the sentiment is the same. So we've swapped the order again. Kurt's done it again. The overlay is gone. So remember the names once again, everybody. But I think maybe that's a sign we should stop talking about social media inundation and move on to our next topic. On a brighter note, too, today's the 1-year anniversary of the first CPL game. So, Coach, when you look back on 2019 and the CPL in its first season, what do you think you're going to remember the most?
Good question. I think I mean, I had a few of the players that played for me contact me right after the first game, and they were a little surprised at the quality. And then, in discussions with them as the league went on, the quality of the games were much better, I think, than a lot of people thought they would have been. And I must admit, I was the same way. I think there's so many things to remember about the game, but the games. But the big thing for me and in terms of a learning experience was of course, the travel and adapting to that sort of situation, and then just going into the various stadiums, seeing that people embrace the league, were behind their players. I think that was beautiful, because for a lot of us, for so many years, we've been saying, we need our own league. We really do need to have something, an identity to call our own. And here it was happening. I was happy that I made a decision to be part of it, and just being part of all of that. And then, of course, seeing players that I worked with still playing in the league, still having some influence, coaches, players that played for me that are now coaching, the banter among the coaches and everything else. I mean, I just think it was way long overdue.
I think that's a pretty universal sentiment that we can all agree with, that it was a long time coming and we're glad it's here. Obviously, we can't wait to get back to hopefully year 2 sooner than later. Ollie, you had a very interesting position on day 1 of the CPL last season. Can you maybe explain a little bit about what the red hat means to people who may be unfamiliar with that term? And then same question for you, just your biggest takeaways from year 1.
Yeah, well, it didn't mean much on that day, I can tell you that, because to explain quickly, the red hat sits on the sideline, and his job or her job is essentially to communicate with both the match officials and the broadcast truck around timings and things that are going on and things like that. So that, as you can imagine, with a new broadcaster in a new league, things were a little hectic in the week leading up to the first game, and so that was the job that I was assigned by virtue of the fact that we had no one else to do it. And that was a pretty unique experience. I'm not convinced, as I've told Kurt a few times, that anyone was actually listening to me in the broadcast truck. So I'm not sure what purpose I was serving, but the upside of it was that I got to sit right next to Jimmy Brennan for the first other game, which was quite a cool experience.
It was actually a club responsibility to provide that, not ours, by the way.
We filled in.
Yeah.
But no, I would say that kind of sums up my recollection of the first season, was just how quickly it all happened. Both from a league perspective and also from a OneSoccer perspective, it all came together so quickly. And it just makes you kind of excited about what's possible when we have a bit more time to kind of lead into things and to really build this league and OneSoccer as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be a company man right now and just talk about all of OneSoccer and what we went through last year, right? So we'll let Stephen talk about the CPL, Oliver talk about himself, and I'll talk about the company, right?
So I was teed up.
So okay. Yeah, I don't really think Media Pro Canada and OneSoccer really ever got the credit it deserved after the deal to be the rights holder for the CSB really came together around the end of 2019, if not early 2020, giving us only a few weeks to plan for the season. We brought in a producer, Kyle Hall, who did a great job organizing things behind the scenes and really had to get things up and running within just a few weeks. So to see the effort that went on the broadcast side to do the best we could to show every single match night. Shout out to the crew and everybody who put that together, and then hopefully we've bigger things to come this year, right? We were almost ready to launch an entire new set of programming before this virus hit. So hopefully we come out the other side of it, and we're even better in year 2.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I think it's a compliment to both the broadcaster, the teams, the players, and just the league as a whole. When you go from, you're launching this league and everyone's excited, but no one knows how it's going to go. They're like, oh, what's the quality going to be like? What's this? What's that? But then when you get to start nitpicking about little things about broadcast and streams, and we're certainly familiar with everything we want to improve as well. But when the conversation shifts to, okay, we're good, but how can we better? I think that's a testament to everybody involved.
Yeah, people are talking about people are watching The Last Dance right now. I was telling our producer before the show, I would love to see a documentary called The First Dance on behind the scenes to get the CPL launched.
Well, we have something.
I don't know how many expletives we'd have to beep out of that, though. I don't know if we can go ESPN style or out like that. We'll get to The Last Dance, actually. It's funny you mentioned that up. But first, I want to get Stephen back involved in the conversation, specifically with what we were discussing earlier with how the league might need to adapt schedules again and change different rules just to fit in a compressed season. Bigger picture, though, for you, if you could change one thing about the game of football right now, what do you think you'd like to see changed?
Well, I mean, look, there's been a lot of discussion about VAR and all of that. And I think the one thing that it did prove to me is that a law in the game, being the offside law, which is designed for the human eye, is flawed. Because really and truly, if you need 3, 4, 5 minutes to make a decision with a laser line on an offside, with stop motion, slow mo, 44 different camera angles, then the law is flawed. And they should look into some sort of way to simplify it for the match officials.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of believers in your cause on this panel right now. Not to get too in depth, but what do you think a way to circumvent is probably the wrong word, but what's a simple solution or logical solution in your eyes to make that better? Is it eliminating VAR once again, or just clarifying the rule?
Well, I mean, VAR is new and it's going to go through its growing pains. I mean, I might have had some better results because of it. To be honest, at the international level and at a club level, but I believe in the human element of the game. VAR was brought into the game really because of the amount of money in the game, and that was the reluctance all along about having to bring it in, and there's only so many leagues that can actually afford it, right? So I mean, I think it's here to stay. They've got to go through their growing pains until they get it right. As for the offside law, just clarify it. This is what it is. You can't have, if somebody's feet are pointing towards their own goal and their heels are in an offside position, how can they be seeking an advantage? As a simple example, right? So, just make it clear with, all these different body parts, and an armpit could score a goal. I dare anybody in sport to tell me when in football when an armpit scored a goal, So let's just get it right.
I've seen a lot of body parts score goals. But,
not an armpit though. Name me an armpit.
Stephen, don't you want more calls to be right though? Like I'm a staunch supporter of VAR. I want more calls to be objectively correct.
Well, yes, of course, but where does it start? Where does it end? Right? Because I've seen so many instances. I saw 17 seconds or 16 seconds of a play in the Under-17 World Cup being called back. I think it was against Canada by VAR. The game went on for 16. The actual problem that VAR picked up was 16 seconds before the goal scored. I mean, how far does it go?
Well, it goes back to the attacking phase.
But why? Why? It could be. Suppose it was the defending phase.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I don't know where you.
Isn't it?
I don't know where you draw the line.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I am against it. But I like the human element of the game. Be it it's painful at times. The biggest thing for me with VAR is that I think it probably would cut down on a lot of hesitant to say it, but bribery in the game from an official standpoint, because there are a lot of officials out there that don't make any kind of money that are easily susceptible to that.
Yeah, that's a can of worms that might be best saved for a longer discussion. But I think it's clear we know where Coach Hart stands on VAR. Question from the chat for you, Coach. Question is, what do you think Atlantic Canada needs to do to produce more top-level talent?
Well, I think we have the numbers in terms of youngsters playing and all of that. We need to get the competitive element right, and there's once you start talking about youngsters and the word competitive, people go all crazy. But the nature of the sport is somebody wins and somebody loses. But they've got to get the balance of the leagues right. And the young players need to be in that sort of environment to cut their teeth. You need to fix the league structures and get that right. Of course, all the other things would stem from that, because the better you get that right, is the more the coaches are going to have to do their homework. The more they're going to have to take more interest in the individual development of players. There's a lot of emphasis on the collective at a young age, and from a technical standpoint, there's still a lot missing in the game.
Coach, I know this has been a bit of a sensitive subject around the league when we brought it up, so I hope it's not too difficult a question to answer. But where do you kind of stand on the idea of a Wanderers Academy and how that could fit into the larger landscape in Nova Scotia?
Well, that will be difficult. Because we have to live in a realistic world here. And if we start a Wanderers Academy, then you become in competition with the clubs, right? I think the clubs can do their homework. The clubs can do it. We can be a guidance for the clubs. And in the age category that the player development structure in the province and the city breaks down, which is largely between the ages of 17 to 21, we can sort of take over. Once we are, we have an identification of the players that could come at that age group, or come out of that age group, I should say. We could bring them in with us as we try to do. They train with us. We sort of, try to give them that little stimulus to say, hey, I'm not that far off. They're looking at me. I could come to training, see where I stand. We can certainly help with that age category. In terms of formulating a team, a sort of a team at that age, again, how do you get the necessary competition to raise their standards? Because there comes environment. Environment is what raises players. You can be the best coach in the world, but if you don't have the environment, you're not going to raise players. And you can be a poor coach, but have a very good environment, and players still come out your system because of the environment. So we need to take care of the environment.
Another question coming in from the chat, Coach. The viewer wants to know, what do you think about the designated player rule, and do you think it would help or hurt the Canadian Premier League?
Too soon. It'll be way too soon. I think it's from an image standpoint, people would love to see them, but money is not flowing in this league, not as yet. It is a developmental league in many aspects, a professional developmental league in many aspects, and it's too soon for that, way too soon for that.
So this is why one of the reasons I was really looking forward to this year compared to last year was some of the young international talent that was coming in, just and the new kind of recruitment model that the league is using. I think Alex Marshall might have come through that system, players like that. So you're saying that's kind of the course right now that makes the most sense for the league, is trying to find those maybe younger Central American, Caribbean, South American players that can potentially come in to use CPL as an opportunity to boost itself to potentially go somewhere else.
Yeah, even Europe is. There's a ton of players there that can't get a foothold. May have been too small or whatever, and matured later. I do think that is the way to go in many respects, because as I said, financially, designated players, for what they bring to the league, they also take away a lot financially, and we're not ready for that, I don't think.
All right, Coach, we're winding down our time with you, so it's time that we get to our game of the day. And I'm not sure if you know this or not, but you, Stephen Hart, are kind of famous around OneSoccer for what we dubbed as Stephen Hartisms. And what we mean by that is some quips we hear from players in interviews, or we stream we get all the press conferences in. So our producers and our talent, we have seen and heard some of the best Stephen Hartisms. So we're going to read you a couple of our favorites, and we want you to explain them to us. And first up, this one was for the fans. What was Taste the Soup all about?
Oh boy, I regretted saying that the minute it came out of my mouth. But basically what it was that Canadian soccer, we were struggling to put players in the stands. And in 2007 Gold Cup, I thought the team, the players, they did a tremendous job in playing differently and bringing something different to our game, and they were exciting to watch. And then when I was being placed in a situation where I was now in charge of the team, collectively we were trying to do something different. So it basically said, come and check it out. Come and see what we're about. Don't be a critic and you're not paying to sit down in the stand. If you pay to sit down in the stand, you can say whatever you want. You've paid your money. So come, taste the soup.
Yeah, it's still difficult for the men's national team to fill BMO Field right now, and I think that will come as success comes. But Stephen, just because we have you here and you are a former national team coach, maybe can you compare that team that you took through cycling in 2012 to the group that's there now? I mean, what you liked maybe about that team more than the team now, and maybe what you liked about the team now more than you liked about your team.
I think the team now has probably a lot of flexibility in the offense. We potentially, in my team, we potentially could have had it, but by the time I took over, we went through a real bad patch with losing some of the attacking quality. We lost Ali Gerber, we lost Josh Simpson. Dwayne got injured in the Panama game, etc., etc., and we just didn't have that young player coming through that was ready to take up the helm. But this team here has a lot of flexibility in terms of from the midfield and forward line going forward, and even from an attacking fullback perspective. I'm not going to get into the debate about where Jonathan,
Alfonso.
Alfonso should be playing, but. They have that flexibility, and they on their day, I think in CONCACAF they can beat anybody, especially at home.
What about just one more on this subject? I mean, Atiba, I'm not really sure what his place is right now in the squad. I mean, will he get back into it? Is there still a place in qualifying? I'm not sure. But would you like to see a guy like that get one final go and one final kind of send-off game? And what can you say about his involvement at the national team level?
He should get a final send-off game, in my opinion. I think he's been a wonderful servant. He's been Canada's best player for a number of years. I have a place for him in Halifax if he wants to end his career in the CPL. But yeah, I think he should get a send-off, and a rousing one at that.
Well, if he does go to Halifax, he will be in for some more of these Hartisms. Let's get to our second one. The ball doesn't sweat.
I've been saying that since under 17, because players would come in at 15 and 17 and they would hang on to the balls in the wrong places, and you don't want to discourage that. You hope they learn lessons by losing it, but the ball movement and the ball speed is very, very important in the game, and the ball never sweats. So if you do it right and you do it quickly, you can do it how much you want. That ball is not going to get tired. So make use of it.
Okay, and a quiz for you now. Only one of these, of the next three Hartisms I'm going to say, is real, Stephen. You have to tell us which one you actually said, because they all are very believable. First of all, don't hate the player, hate the game, which sounds a lot like a Stephen Hartism. You can't wag the dog, or football is a lie. Which is true?
Football is a lie.
We thought we were going to stump you on that. And can you explain football is a lie to us?
Well, it's a lie.
Why is it a lie, Stephen?
The reality is you can play very well, you can dominate the game and lose. That's the reality of this game, more than I think any other sport. That's the reality of it. You can totally dominate a game and lose. So football is a lie. Some little thing can happen, whether it be somebody slips at the wrong moment or the referee makes a bad call, and you lose the game. And you can play very poor and win, and people go away talking about how great the team played, and you're in the dressing room thinking, I hope these players don't think this was a good one, because you played poorly and you won the game. So it's a lie.
Yeah.
The game's a lie.
It's one of my arguments for an expanded Euro, which we've already seen, and for ultimately an expanded World Cup is, I love watching the Messis, and I've watched Cristiano Ronaldo up close play for Portugal a half dozen times, but there's nothing like watching an underdog go into a World Cup game against a perceived giant and play well and really capture the imagination of not just their country, but also people around the world. I mean, Trinidad made a World Cup, Stephen, and I can't really remember back to 2002 that much about the games they played, but I'm sure
2006,
but Does that make sense what I'm saying? I mean, did that happen in that country?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 1.5 million people going to the World Cup was the smallest country until Iceland did it. And then I was there to have such a very, very, 3 very good games in the group stage. I mean, England didn't score on them until the 80-something minute. Sweden failed to score with Zlatan and everything that they had. And the heroics of Shaka Hislop in goal. There's nothing like, there's nothing like an underdog. You're right about that.
I think every time, and people would say, well, Trinidad deserved to be there. They qualified. They qualified for the World Cup. But the fact of the matter is that every World Cup, there are teams like that who don't make it and don't have that opportunity, which is why I'm looking forward to a 48-team World Cup.
Well, I would prefer to see more emphasis on the qualifications itself, from television and everything else. Make the qualifications a bigger event than they actually are.
Yeah.
But I think the best teams deserve to be in the World Cup. I don't know about watering it down, too much. I didn't like the Euro. Let me put it that way. I really didn't like the Euro. So
there were some bad games at the Euro. I'll give you that.
You're being kind.
But no, okay. But and what did people say when the World Cup expanded to 32 teams?
Well, I mean, I had no problem with that then. To be honest with you, I had no, because I think there are a lot of countries that were missing out. But I mean, at some point, it is the greatest event. I mean, in terms, it's a world event. You want to see the best teams. I mean, what if you take every sprinter and throw them in the 100 meters in the Olympics? Come on,
Yeah.
There's got to be a line somewhere.
I didn't expect you to be against. I didn't know you were against the little guy. So all right.
I'm not against the little guy.
Don't put words in his mouth, Larson. Come on now. But I think it's a good point about watering down the quality, because what you want is that TV magic, Coach, like you said, about expanding the coverage of this qualification stage. Speaking of TV magic, we talked about The Last Dance a little bit earlier, so this will be the last sort of fun segment we get to today. I'm sure Ollie and Kurt have been thinking on this one since we brought it up. But in case you're somehow unfamiliar with The Last Dance, yeah, but for everyone at home who may not be necessarily basketball fans or not Americans, so you may not be able to see it.
If you've been on the moon for the past week, then yeah, you might not have heard of it.
Ollie's saying,
Just let him get through it. Just let him get through it. Just let him get through it.
Thank you, Kurt. Finally taking my side after 7 weeks. Okay, The Last Dance, an in-depth documentary on Michael Jordan's reign over basketball, produced by ESPN. What I'm trying to get to is, if you could pick a team that hasn't had a documentary of this magnitude done on it, which team would you choose and why? Ollie, I'll give you the first word, even though you just so blatantly disrespected me.
Sorry, Adam. Well, we just mentioned Shaka Hislop, and he actually features in my team, which would be the 95-96 Newcastle United team. I think for anyone who's a big fan of the Premier League, they'll know this story. But for those who don't, Newcastle haven't won the title since the 1920s. And in this particular season, they were coached by Kevin Keegan. They had a very exciting squad, played extremely attacking football. And they were 11 points ahead of Manchester United at the top of the table in January. What followed, unfortunately, was one of the greatest collapses in the history of English football. And it culminated in an infamous interview, which if you haven't seen, you should look up, of Kevin Keegan kind of melting down under the pressure of Sir Alex Ferguson's mind games. So I think when you look at David Ginola, Tino Asprilla, characters like that in that team and what happened over the course of that year, I think that would make a pretty good documentary.
Kurt, who would you pick? And just to clarify, you don't have to go soccer if you don't want to.
I'm going soccer too. I thought about it.
Okay.
I thought about which one would be most entertaining to me, most likely. It would take quite a bit of honesty from the players involved. Stephen Hart might even feature in my documentary because he was coaching Trinidad at the time. But I would want to know an honest, behind-the-scenes look at Jurgen Klinsmann's time with the U.S. national team, because he achieved some things. He definitely underachieved, not making a World Cup and some terrible losses. But I think the players were very, very segregated in their thinking. Some loved him, some hated him, some had behind the scenes were working against him. And I think there's a really, really good story to be told there. And I think it will be told eventually. And I think once a lot of these players who were under Klinsmann kind of retire and step away from the game a little bit, I think you're going to hear a lot of stories about how Jurgen Klinsmann, in my opinion, took an American team, an American program that was loved by an entire country, and completely changed the perception around the U.S. national team. Stephen, you played against that national team, right?
Yeah, we tied them. We tied them, and then when we qualified for the Hex, we still had one game left, and they beat us in the return game in the US. Yeah.
Stephen, what about you? What would you pick for a team for a Last Dance style documentary?
My team will also be a soccer team, football team, and I would like to see the Sao Paulo team that was coached by Telly Santana. I thought that was a fantastic team. They played the Dream Team actually twice, once in an exhibition game where they ran over the Dream Team, and then they played them in the World Club Championship, ran over them again. And Cruyff made that famous statement, if you're going to get knocked down by a car, may as well be a Ferrari. I thought that team played unbelievable football. Very modern, very attacking oriented. It would be interesting because I don't think he, as a coach, got the recognition he deserved.
Mm-hmm. I love that quote too. That's one that definitely stands out from that era. Those are 4 good shouts, gentlemen, or 3 good shouts. The only one I'd add is Leicester's Premier League championship, but I think that's still probably a little bit too fresh. I think that's something that needs to marinate a little bit.
Yeah, but there's got to be some kind of controversy for me. There's got to be something. What makes The Last Dance so good is that you're not really sure how Michael Jordan is going to be perceived in it, right? And there is controversy. There is a GM that's not well liked. I think you got to have that little bit of hatred, right?
Well, I think the hatred comes from all of the other teams and the denial that this can't be happening and how on earth are we letting them get away with this game in and game out. But anyways, these are all hypotheticals, but that's just my take on it. Stephen, we talked a lot about Trinidad and Tobago and Halifax in this show. So I just wanted to ask you, I'm sure you've been asked something similar to this before, but for our sake, what are some of the differences between your home country and your adopted country that really stand out to you? Similarities, sorry, not differences.
Football-wise?
Football, city, or just
culture,
wherever you want to take it.
From a football perspective, I mean, everybody down there plays the game. And when I went back, you forget how much football there is. Whether it's, children, females, males, guys 70 years old, everybody plays all the time, every afternoon, on their own little patch of wherever they can play. But there's very, very different cultures. Trinidad people don't really take anything seriously. They love to have a good time. They live for today. Whatever happens tomorrow happens. It's quite a unique way of living. I kind of like it, but there's a certain indiscipline that goes with it that I don't like. Right. So it's a love-hate relationship with it. And
what about
then, of course,
the similarities? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course. And then, of course, Halifax, it's very similar in that it's coastal. People are very laid back. Maybe not as laid back as Trinidad and Tobago. People are very laid back, very friendly. And they like to have a good time. They really do.
I always like that story, Stephen. I always like that story you tell about going to the supermarket and having the old ladies tell you who should be in your starting lineup.
Yeah. That was a big difference for me going home and the recognition, of course. But being in the supermarket and the person that's cashing you out is giving you advice, and an old lady, the grandmother told me I brought her back to watching the team, which was nice, but I should drop so and so.
Well, Stephen, speaking of loving to have a good time, this certainly was a great time. Thank you so much for once again being flexible and all of the postponements, but you were here, we got the hour in, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Oh, it was great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll be back tomorrow on the Hangout. Asa, Ollie, and Kurt will be talking to Darren O.D., also a new Inside the Game. Bracket Challenge is also live right now on OneSoccer's Twitter and Instagram. So follow out OneSoccer if you haven't already. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, share it with a friend. Let's keep the good times rolling. Everyone stay safe, stay happy, and stay sane. The guys will talk to you tomorrow.
Turn on some lights in your house.